David Allison is absent. James Weeks.
Here.
That's a quorum of council.
Thank you. The work session topic tonight is the City of Cordova 2018 budget discussion. Manager Lanning.
Okay. I would like to, we have it up on the screen for you tonight. I wanted to walk you through where we are and what has changed. As you can see, what we're always concerned about is the bottom line. And in this case, council has approved, council approved the 3 ordinances on second reading at the last council meeting, adding, let's see, about 330,000, I believe, to the budget. So you can see from the general fund revenue total, we're up about 70,000 from the 17 budget projected. The actuals for 17 probably aren't very accurate right now, but they start tightening down in the next couple of months, and we still have those. We're still able to make adjustments, journal adjustments, until about March of the following year, and then after that the audit starts and we get our audit later in the year. So you can see that our revenue is up about 70,000 total, and then our general fund expenditures are still less than they were last year. $4,000, but nevertheless the trend is going down. Emily, if you can go back to the beginning. So just before we do, you can still go to the beginning and I'll keep talking. What that says is, at this moment in the budget, we have about 75,000 to work with. I think when I first arrived here, I said one of the things that I like to do is to pay the staff, keep the lights on, you know, your few equipment needs, and then there's always a discretionary amount left over that, as council members, that's the piece that you guys get to discuss or argue about. So our number at this point is 75, but I'll show you how that goes. Our property tax rate is still the same that was approved in June of this year, 12.35 mils based upon the values, 2.533 million, and you know that, I guess that could fluctuate a little bit, but that's the amount that we want to raise. That's what we want to be consistent at. The real change has been in our sales and use taxes. With the motor vehicle fuel tax and those changes, in addition to increased enforcement, we've gone from 3.3 to 3.5. Now, I'd indicated early on that the 3.3 was pretty optimistic given our history. Now, 215 was higher than that, 216 was a little bit lower than that. So we compromised at 3.3 to try to be in the ballpark there. The other change that we had going for, you can see the 175 for the motor vehicle fuel tax, and then you can see the PILT money was up a little bit to significantly increase our tax revenue. Everything else is virtually the same except the raw fish tax. As you know, we've said that we've analyzed this and we've given you a printout on this, that the raw fish tax has been historically, now over the last 12 years, it's been about 1.1 million. And we talked about having the raw fish tax at 800,000 as a consistent measure over the next several years to give us an opportunity to take the bumps out of the budget. And I would offer this. Even if your average is 1.1, if you get your raw fish tax number too high, if you predict it too high, for example, we predicted it at, we would estimate it at 1 million next year, and you had that $700,000 a year, then you're in trouble. So I think your predictive level has to be a little bit lower than you'd always be comfortable with. And perhaps next year we can say, gosh, based on our experience, let's raise our raw fish tax to this. It also helps us in the nature of we're gonna bank some of it. We'll create a separate holding tank for those funds so that we keep track of that in a really good, efficient manner, so that when we know we can draw to take the bumps out, and we can say, may not be 800, but it might be 900, it might be 950 going forward. I think I'm going to say this, and I think the ultimate goal here is we have a $10.5 million government to run at this point. And our goal is to raise $10.5 million, but increase our efficiencies in the way we do things, so that that $10.5 million pays for everything we do, plus gives us some ability for capital purchases and buildings as we go forward, without having to necessarily look for grants. And I think that's the goal of what we're trying to do. So Leif, you can go down clear to the there's one other item, trying to figure out where it is. It's probably farther down toward keep going, interfund transfers in, other revenues. You can see there's a number that says miscellaneous revenue. It's 148, and that is significantly higher than the other line items. The reason that line item is higher is the value of 2 shared positions with CCMC that we're embarking upon this coming year. And half of the cost of those 2 positions are found in that number. So our miscellaneous revenue is in the nature of 25 or so, and the shared revenue is 123, something like that. So that's where that number comes from, and that's why that one's a little bit different. What that also does is, Leif, you can go down a little bit farther. Our debt service reimbursement has remained consistent this year. And so what we start with is our expenditures. And the expenditures start with City Council. And as you can see, going down the line items, we've basically gutted all those budgets to virtually nothing. We did that last year. As I've talked before, our objective is to figure out where our bare bones operation exists and what those line items look like over a couple of years. We do have an actual history with those line items, but that history is based upon a different philosophy of budgeting and a different need in budgeting. So 16 is our baseline. Remember, our baseline was our staff costs were A, and our operating costs were $2,021,000. And we're trying to create a reduction in the staffing costs and an increase in the operating expenses, because in 2017, our personnel costs went down, but our operating expenses also went to $1.4 million, $1.399 million. So we took a substantial amount of money out of the operating budget. So our goal is not an increase in personnel costs, but an increase, when we get healthy, an increase in those operating expenses to get to our baseline year of 2016. So looking at the City Council, knowing that we had $75,000 to work with, I went back to staff and we asked, you know, where do we really need to make some changes here? And if you go to line item, City Council operating supplies, that one has been requested at 1,000. $1,000. And we're looking at line items in some of these budgets where we've actually gone over. We've exceeded our appropriation for last year. Go to city clerk, and we would add downwards operating supplies. That would be 1,000. Communications goes to 2,000. Professional services go to 2,500. And I don't mean to do this agonizingly, but there's not very many of these, so we're going to go through this exercise to see, so you can understand how we're allocating this. The next one is election expense, go to 2,500 on that one. And that's really where we have any major changes. There are other requests. Fire and EMS is the next one down. If you go to the line item that says communications, that goes to 5,500. Professional development, which is training and so forth, goes to 6,500. You'll see a lot of these line items in this budget, in particular zero. That's because things are clumped into particular line items so they can take advantage of, or they can move it where necessary. Information services, temporary employees goes to 12,000. The reason that goes to 12,000 is because of the fact that we're sharing the IT person. So in terms, the IT position fills in a lot on events like tonight, the setups, the chair downs, and those kinds of things. So with that absence, we're going to have to compensate for that. And it's still a good measure for us. Go to facility maintenance, custodial supplies, it goes to 8,000. And then on the fuel and lube, a little farther down, that goes to, there you go, that goes to 4,000. And I think those are the requests that we had. So then you can go to the bottom line again.
Alan.
Yes, sir.
So on the last one, you said goes to 4,000. You can go back to that. And then in the 2017 actual, you guys, I don't know, the fuel and lube.
Yes, sir.
It's only 852.
Yeah, that's because they spent money probably out of a different line item, and it just didn't get reconciled. But I think that line item is going to be over this year, so we wanted to up it a little bit because the facility maintenance is taking care of a lot of different things. You know, $1,500 difference, but again, that's...
Yeah, it's more than it's been in the last 3 years.
Right, understand. Our costs are going up in that too. Our vehicles are getting older and harder to maintain. So, if you go down to the bottom line.
All the way bottom?
All the way to the bottom, yeah.
And I don't have this live calculating on.
Yeah,
What's that?
it wasn't calculated.
I don't have a live calculating.
Oh, you don't?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. All right, I'll go back to where I was. So in my calculation, that's in the 13,000 additional to the budget. So what you really have is you have about 61.5, or less 13,000. So you have 61.5 that's available if those changes are acceptable. So the question I have for you is, what do you want to do? Do you want me to figure it out? Do you want, we do have considerations in the collective bargaining agreement, which has not been negotiated yet, which will add some cost to our budget, but we hope over the course of the year that our savings are going to be able to absorb that, but there's no guarantee of it. So that's kind of where we're at, and I'd be happy to entertain questions or take direction. I can certainly figure out where to spend the 61.5, where to put it, but I always like to give council an opportunity to do something they want to do. It's not much, but still.
We've had Paul Trombley come in a couple times and talk about the heating facility for the building down there, and what it might take to upgrade it or save us money in the long run, and that building doesn't seem like it's going to go away. In fact, soon, states have partnerships with the troopers in our EMS group. Is there a number for what they were hoping to have done or purchased? Or I talked to Paul the other day about.
I don't have that number at my fingertips right now. What I do know is Weston and some of our maintenance crew are working hard to get that system working appropriately. You know, there's been 15 odd different repairs over to that system over the years with, you know, no record of what happened or how it happened or why it happened. And so Weston is working on trying to get that all straightened out. And this morning, that particular item really led us to talk about developing our own internal database concerning all of our equipment, all of our facilities, everything we own, you know, and what the maintenance schedule looks like, so that automated, so that we can go in and, you know, touch the button and find out the last time the cap was changed on fire hydrant 247, so that we can be more accurate, and then all those changes would be tracked on that burner. But we're trying to do that internally right now. But you're probably, you know, 25, 30, 40,000 for a new heating system at least, unless, you know, we get our oil waste quickly in a position where we can, if we're going to retrofit it, we'd retrofit it in that manner instead of some other manner. So those are things to think about going forward.
Just a thought, or
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to have a little more time to digest it and see it, and then you talked to Paul. Well, I got jumped on by the school. They need money too, so if there's extra money, the school is sure appreciate any bump in funding for their operations. There's issues over there that we're going to get hit with later. But I'd sure love to have time to, it'd have been nice if we could have emailed this to us or something.
This is our 6th version of the same budget. We've issued you this budget, the expenditure portion of it. This is the 6th time we've talked about this.
Now.
No, that general fund expenditure total has not changed except for the 13,000 I just added to it.
So, oh, I'm sorry.
I just, yeah, let me find out what his budget is and maybe start going this way.
Anyway, when we look at a 10 million plus overall budget, and we're looking at the $61,000 windfall at the end of it, we're talking like less than 0.5% or something of what we're doing, and this is a projected budget. I wouldn't mind letting it sit there. I know we're going to spend it, but we don't have to start right off the beginning of the year saying, oh, free money, let's spend it. Because we're going to have whatever catastrophe to shore is, it will need some kind of Band-Aid going along. So I just assume keep it in-house and see when we need it.
Well, under what item do I look to see do we have a line item budget for the hospital this year?
We don't have the line item budget for the hospital. Oh, we do. The hospital CMC appropriation right there is 625. It's up from 566 that we budgeted for the hospital, but we've actually spent 614 because we've backfilled some of the other appropriations on the hospital, so that number's a little bit higher. And then in the final draft of this budget, the revenue and expenditure budget from both the hospital and the school district will be included as supplemental information. And Robert, I didn't mean to be short on the budget there. We've issued this several times, and at some point we haven't been sending out we haven't been creating packets because tonight's plan was to do this online. So we were talking about it online.
There's been modifications and changes and things, and no matter how simple and small,
Right.
It's just something that you know it intimately. It's you
Right.
pay, you live and breathe it, and then I show up at 6 o'clock and you run through a bunch of stuff, and now so that was where I take a little more time to absorb and look and compare things and understand it.
And that's why I tried to give you those individual line items, the changes to both the revenue line items and the expenditure line items that we had from the last draft of the budget. I'd be happy to answer, in greater detail if you have questions. We tried to maintain everything else the same. That, of course, one of the big good things for us is the quorum contract is over with, so we don't have that expenditure for next year.
I want to look at the administrative allocated cost, or how they pronounce it. Talked earlier, and you mentioned it was a 13%, and I see, it's for the enterprise funds, and I see the campground, it got eliminated. All the other enterprise funds, their administrative costs got lowered. The harbor, which does a lot of its own billing and paperwork, got a substantial raise in their fee for, so I just why would the campground, not an enterprise fund, have an administrative, let's just call it administrative fee, and then the harbor that does a lot of its own stuff why is it raised so much?
Well,
I
don't know the past allocation percentage. It was my understanding that administrative fees were calculated at about 15% for each department. And when I did that calculation, it was too high, and the impact was significant on the
water, sewer, and garbage?
Well, on everybody. The 15% would have raised something in the neighborhood of, I forget the number, it would have gone up to 560 or 580, something like that, just for the harbor. It was pretty high. Well, no, it wasn't that much, but it was significant. It would have added more than $80,000 to their cost. So I went back and I started back calculating to figure out a little bit of increase in the general fund budget for the services we perform, and then try to attach a percentage to that across the board. And that number came in at 13,000. What that does is it raises
13% or
13%, I'm sorry. It raised a little extra money. It took it from 492 to 503 in terms of administrative costs, but it shifted some of that burden to the harbor just based upon the fairness of calculation.
Okay, and fairness of calculation, that's a nice phrase. So water and sewer garbage, they got a decrease, which is great to everybody else, you know, maybe our rates won't go up there. The other enterprise fund, it doesn't have one. It's to skate. And then the harbor, which is trying to replace stock, and it does a lot of its own billing and the stuff that you do for the water, sewer, and garbage in the camper park. They already do it down there. So it comes out to about a 4% rate increase at the harbor level, or that money could go into the enterprise fund for future monies we need for the replacing floating stock. So my concern is the fairness thing. We should look at it a little better. If they're doing a lot of the stuff anyway, and this money could be going in the depreciation fund for replacement of floating stock that the city isn't gonna have to come up with later. So anyway, I'd like that looked at to see why, you know, if we could, we're gonna have to replace floating stock in the harbor, and as much as we can, we've raised the contribution to the depreciation fund. There's been money left over in the budget for several years, quite a few years. It's gone in there also, so there is a nice fund, but allocating, taking more money out of there for balance of budget that they're doing, it could cost us later when it comes time to do a job. So I'd like to have that looked at.
Well, that's a council decision, obviously, and after conversations with the harbor master and no objection from the harbor commission, that was the formula we arrived at, and that's where I'm at.
Councilman Jones?
Well, I had some other things to talk about besides what Mr. Beadle was mentioning, but I agree with him that, you know, the harbor does a lot of their own paperwork, and when I pay my harbor bill, I don't come to City Hall, I go to the harbor master. When I pay my water or sewer, I come to City Hall. So for them to pay the exact same percentage as the other enterprise funds, I guess I don't see the thought process in that. As far as what to do with any extra monies, you know, those are taxes we just raised. That's why we have extra. That I can't remember exactly what it was, $74,000 is about what we raised by raising property tax. You know, got rid of a compensatory discount for 30 grand, and just because we have it doesn't mean we have to spend it, like Mr. Guard said. And the school's seen $256,000 cut between 15 or between 16 and 18. So, you know, I'd either like to see us go back down to a property tax level that we were at before June, or if we are going to keep it the same and we do have extra money, maybe look back filling the school budget a little more. Yeah, I guess those are my thoughts on that.
I would offer that the process for doing that is, while we're at this number and there's 61.5 unaccounted for, I've said this repeatedly over the last year plus, that's still not enough money to do the things that you need to do. We're trying to be lean, we're trying to stabilize at a level where we know we can work. This doesn't allow for the replacement of any vehicles. It doesn't allow for any facility maintenance. It doesn't allow for any of those things to any large degree. if we had to replace a $20,000 roof, we don't have that appropriated for any capital projects. You'll see that our capital projects list for you doesn't exist because there aren't any capital project requests going forward. We're not building anything or making anything except for the oil waste building based upon the harbor funds. And so I think the better approach with both the school district and the hospital is to try to have a consistent appropriation with them. And if they need funds for something, they can certainly come and request that. And I think that's a better way to operate than just giving them money. I realize what their request is, and I'd sure like to be able to fulfill that, but we're trying to run a whole system here. We're trying to keep the hospital afloat. We're trying to keep the school district healthy. We're trying to keep the city healthy, the harbor healthy. We're trying to keep everything healthy. There's a lot of responsibility, as you know, mixed up in that. So I would say caution is better in that respect. And that 61.5 isn't very much money. In addition to the harbor, they do their billing for specific things, but there's a whole system of accounting and payroll and human resources and engineering and all things that we share that go into the harbor as well. It's not just about the billing for the harbor. And those things take up a lot of time and effort. And I would offer to you, from my perspective, if I asked the sewer or the waste to pay 18% and I asked the harbor to pay 9%, who would I make mad in that system? So the way I can apply it that makes sense is an equal percentage across the board, and that's fair. And I would say, okay, I probably didn't calculate the money from the ODIAC into this, and I can go back into this about $7,000. That'd be to make it fair. Now we're also embarking upon, an expansion. We're trying to rebuild the harbor. We're trying to expand our RV offerings. We're doing studies on 2 places. We have a couple of full-blown plans prepared for RV parks coming after the first of the year when we have strategic planning questions and updates and some of those conversations. So we do a lot of work other than just the billing for the harbor. There's enforcement. We've got enforcement going on right now. Who's doing the enforcement? We've got police going down there. There's so many things that go on that are intershared between departments. It seems like the only way that I can apply it fairly.
I'm sorry, I can't totally buy into that. Same thing for others. But what I'd like to suggest, though, is if you gave the harbor value for that 50,000, those are, what's the harbors and what isn't changes on, depending on the conversation of the application. It's the harbors if it needs repair, but then if there's a lease, now it isn't the harbor anymore, it's the city's. So what I'd like to suggest then is, give the harbor some value for that. There's land down there on that north fill where the ramp is that anybody could put a letter of interest in, and it goes through the process, whether it's not available or not. Is lease the land to the harbor. The harbor wants to do some expansion. They want to do some improvements, but they can't if they don't know if the land's going to be there next year. So if there's some value you could give the harbor for this that would allow them to grow also and do improvements in their budget, not the city. The fishermen, the users of the harbor, could see more benefit with this rate increase with nothing really, just a 20-year lease. There you go. It's yours now. It can't be encumbered by somebody wanting to buy it. They know they got 20 years to improve toilets, drains. You know, if there's going to be something like that, give the harbor a value for it.
Well, the harbor is not an entity unto itself. The harbor is the city. All that happens is the harbor operates under an enterprise fund structure, which requires them to pay for all of their operations out of the fees they collect, so that the city council or other entities cannot
Tap into those funds.
tap into those funds and use them for general operations. So the enterprise operation is just it's an accounting methodology for the harbor rather than an ownership. You guys own the harbor. It's the city council's harbor, it's the people's harbor, and I'm trying to figure out a structure where we would lease our own property to ourselves.
What it does is creates a mechanism that the harbor can develop without fear of, is it going to go up for sale? I mean, it has in past councils. There's letter of interest in property down there, and it goes through the process. The process is important, but it goes through the process. And is the harbor go forward on any things we've talked about at council, their long-range planning? So just a suggestion that, yeah, you could lease it yourself. I don't see why not. It's an entity in itself. It just makes it makes unavailable. It's encumbered now. It's leased to the harbor. So, council, any other thoughts on the, I don't know that I've heard anything on, so basically the $13,000 you're suggesting is basically kind of a true up on where you see the expenses in those line items.
Correct.
Ending up by the end of the year.
Correct.
So that's just kind of a way of showing them this looks like right now, at this point in the year, that we have about a $60,000 balance. So,
right.
And that's a good thing. But,
provided all the revenues come in and the expenditures come in. And I was going to say earlier, and I don't mean to interrupt, that my next version of this is going to be the resolution on December 6th. I'm going to bring you a final packet, because we're, although we have until the end of the month, there are a lot of, we've been doing this for a while, so I don't see a lot of changes unless, I hope you can give me line item changes if that's what you see.
I was going to mention this in my mayor's report as well, but I kind of have a little verbal update. But I know the harbor upgrades is a council priority and in our capital priorities and stuff. But as far as city staff time spent grant writing or pursuing things, that comes out of admin. I mean, that isn't something that you would bill the harbor separately for.
Yeah.
And then the legal fees, I know there were some legal issues down in the harbor that had to be reconciled. The city also pays for those. Those don't come out of the harbor's budget, so, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of mixing up. We've had some ownership issues and different things down there, enforcement issues, and we've had to call Holly 2 or 3 times in the last month just for that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking out loud, just over the last year, having seen the things that are being spent, it actually seems like the admin in the harbor has been higher than the other departments. So anyway, so other questions or comments, Councilor? I think I'm hearing that Council's just saying they don't really want to appropriate or identify a purpose for that $61,000, but just kind of leave that, let that ride in the budget and see where we end up at the year end.
I was just thinking of consideration of building. We can't heat that place and lose our trip. We're spending, that money's gone.
Well, yeah, I think as always, if in any facility that we own, if there's an emergency, if the heat goes out, we're going to fix it, regardless of what the cost is. because we have people located in there, we have leases in there that we have to perform, and so we're gonna fix it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna come to you and say, we're gonna take the money from here, we're gonna take the money from there. For example, in this year's fish tax, because it was significantly more than expected, you know, our central treasury cash fund has improved tremendously. We have really drawn that fund down over the last year and a half, you know, in a cash flow perspective, and that's very, very important. We're actually juggling payments. Remember the conversation we had about the $225,000 that was still remaining to be paid from the Cordova Center that we had early last year? Now, that was a prime example. That money wasn't appropriated, but it had to be paid. So that came out of the central treasury cash flow. And we have issues like that you know, come around from time to time. So this really makes us healthy in that respect. It looks like a great windfall, and it really helps us be healthy, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's a windfall. I think it's a correction for our cash flow.
You're talking about the fish tax.
Yes.
So, for that, I would like to see you mentioned earlier a separate pot to keep track of excess fish tax revenues that aren't spent from year to year. Not sure how we would accomplish that, but you know, we balanced the budget last year with $860,000 out of the permanent fund. Then we figured out that we were wrong about what we budgeted for the fish tax. We actually have an extra $760,000 coming in. So I personally would like to see at least a portion of that go back into the permanent fund to offset what we pulled out. You know, we calculated wrong last year. It was a great thing, but we still spent out of our savings account in order to make the bills, you know, in order to cover the bills, make ends meet. So would be nice to see some of that get put back in.
Again, I would caution, you know, in year one, before you even get into the plan, to jump into something like that, I think would be financially ill-advised. I would like to have John here to help understand exactly the impact of that 760. But another thing, you know, we had been using a $750,000 line of credit for cash flow when we were doing things on the Cordova Center. And we just did the $2.some million LT project. And we had asked for an extension of that line of credit, which was at the time not approved. So that all of that upfront out-of-pocket payments came out of our cash flow. And so that 716 just helps replenish those things until that, you know, everything is settled up on that. That's how that sort of stuff comes around. And so I would caution against thinking that the 716 is a windfall. It's not a windfall. It's a true up of the revenue that we would anticipate. And while you did take $876,000 out of the permanent fund, you know, what was it? 176 of that went to the hospital. So that 700 is the difference that we didn't have for operations. So it's really not a big windfall.
Councilman Gar.
So basically what we're talking is accountings and semantics. Whether it's permanent fund or our daily operating fund or whatever, it's money that we've got and it's accounted for. All that's going to equate health, financial health. By the time we get past a substantial portion of this 3-year program that we're working on to get a good idea of exactly what it costs us to run Cordova in a healthy manner and what it, you know, where we're throwing money away. if we start trying to juggle dollars and pots and throwing stuff here and there before we even have a good idea of what's going on, we're never really going to accomplish what we're trying to do. I'm not verbalizing this very well, but anyway, but we want to take a long-term view at it. And if we start trying to chalk it out into small sections and make our decisions in small sections over this long period of time, we're going to get no different results than we have been over the past.
You know, but taking money out of the permanent fund, it's for that, it takes,
I understand.
and so to take it out of the permanent fund for something, and then let's pick a term for it. I'm gonna call it the general fund. There is a reason for different pots and that.
I understand, but this can be accounted for and things can be evened out.
And I think that's what he was saying is we took it, and if we didn't use it, the true up, the money should have went back in the permanent fund because it wasn't being used for what it was intended. The money was being used for operating.
For the money that we used out of our revolving daily operating fund, would we then have to go back to replace it and stuff, or we didn't get our line of credit for the LDT project?
If that's
money out of the permanent fund?
Yes, if that was the process, yes. You don't just take money out of one pocket and put it in the other and say, well, it's all the same. It isn't.
Okay.
I mean, there's different constraints on different money.
It's all accounted for, and it's all audited at the end of the year. So whether you carry it in your left pocket or your right pocket, general accounting practices are general accounting practices.
Yes,
Don't know where the money went and where it's sitting.
but they appropriated the money out of the permanent fund for a reason. The reason was a shortfall in revenue. A shortfall in revenue it didn't happen. They got 1.16 for the fish tax, not 400,000. So they appropriated the money to cover the shortfall. The shortfall never happened. So that's my point, and that's to why that money should go back. I mean,
So the plan is though, but that was last year, that money was taken out to balance last year's budget. So when that raw fish tax money comes in, the plan going forward is with that restricted account is that if that excess goes into that raw fish fund, then I'm especially suspicious with that 1.16 million that our 2018 is going to be low. If we put that money back in the permanent fund and then we get a $700,000 raw fish tax, we're going to just have to pull that money right back out. I think what Jeff's trying to say is if we start getting those accounts, if we just leave the raw fish tax to levelize the raw fish tax account, and hopefully, I mean, this 3-year plan, if we get to where the goal is, to where we have the operation, we get to where that $10.5 million budget is meeting the operational and the capital needs, then hopefully we'll be in a position where we can start repaying that permanent fund. I think I've heard almost all the council say we want to try to keep that permanent fund whole and have it earning revenues. But
the guiding principle of the strategic planning process was economic sustainability and our desire to take the uncertainty out of the yearly budgeting process. If we go back and say, because the fish tax was higher than we thought, we should put this money back into the permanent fund. I understand the logic of that, but it defeats the whole, in my mind, it defeats the whole point of sustainability in taking the uncertainty out of the budget process. Give it a year. See where we are next year. That's what we're trying to do to get to the end goal of 2020. It's not about an individual year or an individual line item. If we budget 800,000 this year, if we got another, say we got 1.2 million, and we budgeted 800 next year, and we got 1.6 million. At that point, you're gonna look at your central treasury and you're gonna say, this is really healthy and we have a good amount of money in here. We can transfer that back to the permanent fund. But before we do that, I would ask you all to double secret write on a piece of paper what you think the permanent fund level should be at. Is it 7 million? Is it 8 million? Is it 9 million? Is it 10 million? Is it 11 million? That's the first decision you have to come to, is where do you want the permanent fund to be? Because then we can plan going forward how to restore the permanent fund to that number. But independent of knowing the goal that we're trying to achieve, every time we get a few dollars, we can say, oh, we need to replace the permanent fund. And that really shortchanges our planning as we go forward, in my opinion.
Do you have a question, Susan?
I was just gonna say, if we wind up with 61.5 extra in this budget, I don't know if that would be considered not a balanced budget. In the past, when we've had extra, we've just called it transfer to general fund reserve line item. And then it just stays in the central treasury, but at least it's there in a line item, and then the first time we need a little bit of money, let's take that first then.
Clay. Yeah,
Clay.
Councilman Beadle.
Since we're talking about the permanent fund also, and we got a couple minutes left, is I showed Clay a presentation that I was privy to about our investment account at UBS. And if we run out of time, just to get it on the table, is I'd like to see an RFP go out for our management of our permanent fund. I think it's warrants a look at, an update, and it is a very important, critical part of this pie, and we haven't looked at it. I'd like to see personally the whole council is a monthly statement, see what the fees are, what, you know, it's a performance and stuff. But I think that it's been a long time, and as long as I've been on council, there has been no review of it. But the same outfit, basically the same conservative approach. There's a definite, it could do a lot better. And I think as far as we're spending all this time and effort and money on making a budget, that is a critical part of it, and I'd like to see an RFP go out on it.
What would be your earnings goal in terms of percentage?
I'm sorry?
What would be your earning goal on our investment?
The one I looked at that I think it was the last 5 years, their UBS raised the fees every year, and their net of fees, their earnings were 2.2%. The way I'm understood is inflation is 0 to 5%, so say 3. So they're not even keeping up with inflation. So maybe these guys are, but as important it is to us, and as we're looking at it as a backstop for troubled times or that rainy day, I think it's very critical and very important to put an RFP out, look at it.
As I look at this, that's the reason I asked what your earnings goal would be. What?
10 to 15%.
10 to 15%?
That was, and then where I pulled that number out of was, that was the average of other investment firms with the same investment strategy as far as risk. So at that much difference, I think it warrants at least an RFP. If these guys, if UBS can come back and give us a stellar offer, whatever, keep riding. But if not, and I've dealt with this on another board, transferring the money to another management firm, there was no fee, so there wouldn't be a loss of hiring somebody else to manage it. But if we could make 5% over 2%, 2.2%, it could be huge. And then on those rainy days, we are growing. We're doing our financial fiduciary responsibility.
Okay. We can put that on the pending agenda and when we get to that regular meeting. And we're getting close to the end here, so I wanted to make sure, see if there's any final comments or questions from council.
I guess just that I would like to see going forward, we have a good way to track the extra fish tax. So not sure what form that would be in, but
Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
Wouldn't it just be a line item? I mean, you could just.
Well, it's a line item, but we're gonna have to have a method to separate the tracking of that particular line item.
Said it's a budget.
Yeah,
There it is, right there.
Yeah.
A line item that says, well, fish tax, unexpended that year, or some title, it's just a line item.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you should be able to go back and push up that account. When it was started, to look at that, get a report on, tell it when it was inception.
I'll have a mechanism.
Yeah, I'd just like to be able to see it because, 5 years from now, if the 800 was low, because our 10-year average is 1.1, then we should have a pretty good chunk of money, and maybe that'll help us replace the harbor. So.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, without
The full packet. I will send it to you all online, but it's going to be in color. It's going to be eventually bound. So the next one I send to you is going to be relatively thick, so we don't want to do that a whole bunch of times. So I get yelled at for the copier costs. So just so you know, that'll be in your box as soon as we get it put together, so that you'll see the full thing.
Okay, thank you. So without objections, I'll adjourn the work session. We'll take just a couple, 3 minutes before we. Their city council meeting on November 15th, 2017 to order at 7:04. Please join me in pledging the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A roll call, please.
Mayor Copeland,
Here.
James Burton is absent. Ken Jones,
Here.
Jeff Gard,
Remember your mics too.
Here.
Robert Beadle,
Here.
David Allison is absent. James Weiss.
Here.
That's a quorum of council.
Approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the regular agenda of November 15th, 2017.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Disclosures of conflicts of interest. Does council have any conflicts to declare on any of the items on the agenda? Hearing none. Communications by and petitions from visitors. We don't have any guest speakers this evening, so would anyone in the audience like to comment on agenda items?
Barb Jewell, 2.2 Mile Whiteshed Road. Good evening. I wanted to comment on ordinance 1161 this evening, item 12 on your agenda. I very much appreciate the attention to detail in terms of saving money, being more efficient in your processes. The one thing I would ask is that in your definition of publish, or perhaps within the resolution, you identify that you will publish things on your website. I understand that you're looking to cut publication costs and paper and all of that, which makes a lot of sense given the conversations about the budget and having fewer personnel. But the one thing I would say is that it leaves it very open as to just hanging it up on a piece of paper outside the building. And not everyone is able to get down here in time to see that, whereas on your website, which has gotten much more accessible over the years, I don't think it takes a whole lot of time to attach a document to that website. So just I would ask you might consider that when you're thinking about that resolution.
Okay, thank you. Other audience comments on agenda items?
Yeah, Tom, 304 Kramer Drive. Speak about the building that the harbor wants to put in, the $200,000 request. I don't know what the process will be to build that, but I guess I would advise council to go for it. I think it's a great project, but I would say that not one dime gets spent on design and engineering from an outside firm. These buildings are simple to put up. You can contact the company, they will do all the engineering, all the design. If you buy the package from them, they'll engineer the foundation. So, you know, in the past, we've used engineering firms out of Juneau, and we don't get what we want. We spend a lot of money. There's an outfit out of Seattle that Trident has used, BizWack. And you call the guy up, you get your conceptuals, you go back and forth a little bit, and then pretty soon you'll have a plan. And if you buy it from him, he'll design it, he'll engineer it, he can get the foundation designed, he'll ship it to you. If there's a problem, he'll get you the parts. They've had great luck with them, like I said, for Trident and Prince William Sound Agricultural Corporation. I think Ocean Beauty's building that they recently put up came out of Texas. This guy's out of Seattle. One out of Texas they had a lot of problems with. So there's no need to spend money outside. You know, keep it all. Otherwise, you're going to end up that $200,000 ends up being $170,000, and you get a building design that's going to cost you $400,000. So that would be my advice when you talk about this, to kind of give direction to staff to maybe research it with some of the local contractors, but do not go out and hand this to an architect or an engineer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Karen Kramer, native village of Iyat, and this is Brent Rowland. He's new to Cordova. He's our enterprises manager, and he's in charge of the paper, which I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about tonight. Because we saw the proposed ordinance change that kind of draws a line through the newspaper advertising, and I understand where you guys are coming from, but I just wanted to let you know that the city advertising constitutes a significant portion of the newspaper budget. And it may actually impact the way we're able to do the paper if that ordinance goes through, and the city should pull their advertising. So that's pretty much all I wanted to just let you guys know, that it's not just a drop in the bucket for us.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment on items on tonight's agenda? Okay, thank you for your comments. Chairpersons and boards and representatives of boards and commissions, CCMC.
Good evening. CCMC, so far for this year, we're doing considerably better from a financial standpoint. Operationally, we're showing a profit of not quite $600,000 through the end of September. And when you compare it to last year, we had a loss of around $350,000 or so. So we're looking at about a $900,000 swing from an operational standpoint. Obviously, that doesn't mean that we've got that much more cash. That's just how we're doing on an accounting basis, and we are making improvements there. So a lot of things that we're doing to try to make that happen. We're cutting staffing. Last year we cut 9 FTEs. So far this year we've cut 6.5 FTEs, and we're also looking at sharing staff with the city. So we've got 2 different positions there that we're making some changes with that will help both the city and the hospital. We're also working with Alan and the city staff to try to cut down the expenses and the cost for our health insurance plans and things like that. So a lot of different things that we're doing to try to make improvements within the structure and operation of the hospital. We had our long-term care regular survey a couple weeks ago. This is something we have every year from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Service. We've not received our list of deficiencies yet, but in general, it seems to be a little bit better than what we had last year with that survey. So as soon as we get that, we'll have to put together a plan of correction and get that back to CMS for approval to address the deficiencies that they may find there. We are also looking at getting the retail pharmacy going fairly soon. Our hope is that we would have the go live and have a grand opening in early December. Our biggest issue now is we're basically waiting on getting all of our payer contracts into our system so that we can actually accept insurance payments. So we're continuing to work on that. We do have several of those in place, but a lot of them only load those into the system on the first day of the following month. So we're hoping to get that going fairly soon and actually get that process going. So overall, a lot of good things going on at the hospital, and the staff and the board there want to send their thanks to the city council and the city for their support and help over the years. So leave it at that unless there's any questions.
Yeah.
Gotta ask it, the UPS, how we...
Yes, we do have that. That project is moving now. We've got the electrical engineering drawings done and working with Weston here, and the RFP should be going out any day now to get the electrical contractors involved in it. So we're hoping to have something more solid very soon, but at least now we do have the project moving forward. There were a couple of options we were looking at that we finally found out were not viable, and we're going with the original proposal from General Electric.
And I did go look at the pharmacy, and it looks really nice. The location, got to meet Heidi. She seems very capable, and excited to see that going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The school board?
Barb Jewell, Cordova School Board. A couple of things that we wanted you to be aware of. We're starting conversations with the city about the gym floor. Over the past 2 years, we've had some significant problems with it. It's not my area of expertise, but related to water damage, buckling, floor bubbling. They've done a number of short-term fixes in an effort to mitigate it and not have to do a major repair. But it is continuing to happen, so people are trying to take a proactive look at how do we go forward planning to solve this problem before it gets too much worse. So I believe that the city staff and the administration have been working very cooperatively on taking a look at what needs to be done and how to get it done. So we appreciate that very much. Probably the other exciting news is that you may have seen on Facebook, the Cordova School District or the Cordova School Board was awarded the Outstanding Board of the Year in the state of Alaska by its member districts. So that was quite an honor and a surprise. And you know, I think the thing that I've tried to point out to people is that's a community award, because school boards don't get that for their schools without the support of their community and the hard work of the students and the staff. So in addition to feeling very honored to be a part of the board that received that recognition, I hope that the community sees that it's a recognition of all the efforts we make towards our schools here in Cordova. Any questions?
I'm just curious because I don't know, I noticed we don't have a student council, haven't had a student council rep coming.
I just got a notice that there's somebody new.
Okay,
So for
great.
next agenda, it's gonna be a different name, and I'll get in touch with her for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Olivia Carroll.
Good.
So,
Yeah, I know they were struggling. The student that was identified and took on the position then had a lot of conflicts with all the other activities he's involved in. So his heart was willing, but there's only one of them.
and the state has a big cash award that comes with the school board of the year?
Unfortunately not.
Any questions? Any questions, council?
No, just thank you, good job.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Councilman Jones?
Oh, I'm sure we'll be having discussions about the gym floor. I was just curious if it was damage that was, the water damage, is it residual from snowpocalypse damage to the roof, or?
I don't think so, but I'm not sure anyone's completely sure. I don't think so only because I know that we did have the insurance company come and do some evaluations and some testing and provided the money and the repairs for the damage that was caused during snowpocalypse. I want to be careful because, again, it's not my area of expertise, but I don't believe that that is the cause.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's being an old building and a really old gym floor.
It's an ongoing drainage problem.
There is concern that it could be a larger drainage issue with the building, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as clerk mentioned, we have a new student council representative assigned, and hopefully we'll see him at a future meeting. Item C, approval of the consent calendar. Councilman Beadle.
Yeah, I want to pull that.
Okay,
Yeah.
and Susan, remind me, do we just move that to,
Probably just before 15 there, under new,
yeah,
would be fine.
so I'll call it
14A?
14A. New and miscellaneous business. Okay, and that's all we had on the consent calendar. So approval of minutes.
Move to approve the minutes.
Have a motion and a second. Any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes? Do you have a question, Councilman Gardner? Okay. So we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved as submitted. We don't have any bids to consider. Reports to officers. I'd just like to add a couple of items to the mayor's report. Councilman Jones and actually Councilman Gard had asked for some information about borough formation. And there have been a couple or three studies done in the past, and John Bitney got those to us, and so I'll be getting that information to Susan so she can get it distributed to council and to Alan. Also, Councilman Jones had asked for an update on the status of our infrastructure request for harbor upgrades, and also the status of the Coast Guard's deployment of the last two fast class cutters. I'd requested, actually it's been quite some time ago, in July, and I followed up with Senator Murkowski's military liaison, what the status of the fast class cutters was. They hadn't selected a final site. I had sent them a letter from council that was in the packet telling them that we had done our strategic planning, that we were looking at other waterfront and harbor upgrades, and that we would like them to take a second look at Cordova. Now with the Army Corps permit approved for Shepherd Point, that was one of the sites that PN&D had sent their engineers over, and at their cost they had walked through and looked at all the potential sites and had indicated that all of the other communities under consideration are going to have to do significant harbor and dock space upgrades. No community they're considering really has this infrastructure in place. So I haven't had a response back, so I tapped him again today, the Coast Guard liaison, and if I don't get an answer pretty quick, I'll work with the Coast Guard and Senator Murkowski's office to get an update on that status. And what we'd requested is basically that they come back to Cordova and look at what we're planning and some alternative sites that might be available. The other that Councilman Jones had asked about was the infrastructure request for the harbor. Congress has yet to take up the administration's infrastructure package, but it sounds like there's starting to be some movement in that direction. So we had submitted an infrastructure request to Senator Murkowski's office, and I'll be following up with them to see what's the status of their forward motion, and remind them that we have that request in, and that we need to move forward with harbor upgrades. So there's a Shepherd Point Road and reception in Anchorage on the 28th of September that I'll be attending, in addition to some CEC stuff that I have to do over there. As I mentioned, that Army Corps permit's been adopted. That's, I don't recall, Susan, do you know if the city council in the past has passed resolutions of support?
Yes.
I think the city council has passed resolutions of support for that project, so.
I can find those. When did you say you're going?
November 28th is a reception. I think council all got invitations to that. But EAC Corporation, Chugach Alaska Corporation will be attendance, and I want to spend a little bit of time with them as well.
Where would those invitations be if council got them?
In our inboxes, they're emailed. So, as I met with Karen Kramer at MBE, as she mentioned, the newspaper advertising, when the newspaper went back into circulation, the area businesses had kind of developed contracts to provide a base funding to make the local paper available, but she spoke to that. Board of Fish is the first week of December. I did make a commitment to attend that. I plan on it in one fashion or another. Again, we don't have a budget for that, so I'm just gonna have to figure out how to to bankroll that. And I wanted to mention, I don't think council may have gotten this correspondence. I just had it in my box yesterday or Monday. But I know there's been some comments about Baylor operations and the options that were available out there. And to be honest, I was a little disappointed that none of the council were able to participate in the DEC tour and inspection of that project, because seeing it firsthand, I was really impressed with the way that facility is being managed, and since I saw it 10 or 12 years ago. And the inspection report came back, and DEC gave, I believe, a 94 out of 97.5 possible points. And they made the comments on the ground out there that it was one of the best managed facilities in the state. So I think we can be really proud of our Baylor and maintenance staff.
Landfill? Do you mean the landfill or the Baylor?
The landfill, I'm sorry, yeah, the landfill. So the refuse department operations in general. And but the landfill in particular. So we have a lot to be proud of with our staff, and when you satisfy regulatory requirements, that translates to no fines, to goodwill with the agencies. It positions you for grant funding, and it's good all the way around. So I just want to extend appreciation to city manager and staff for that, and we'll get a copy of that. I'll get a copy of that to Susan. She wanted to put that in the council correspondence as well. Also, my recommendations for the boards and commissions. I had a good bad problem this time of having more applications than seats available. And it's very difficult to turn volunteers away from serving. And I just tried to do it basically just tried to recommend to council what I thought were the best mix of community citizens that don't participate in the city and other venues that have demonstrated enthusiasm and the use and participation in the areas that they're looking for, and also try to balance the fact that some city councilmen and staff that are on those boards and commissions also have means through staff meetings and on the council to also influence those. So really appreciate all that the volunteers do, and was able to meet with each of the people that I didn't recommend and explain that methodology and encourage them to continue to look for opportunities to participate and contribute. But that's a really healthy sign, and the only outlier was the library, which did not have any applications, so we're still looking for volunteers for that board and commission. And that's all I had to add, so.
I provided a borough information packet for you in your mailbox. I was asked about that process, and so it was nice to do some additional research myself. It includes I tried to find the most concise step-by-step process for you, and hopefully I've succeeded in that, but it's there's a lot out there. I provided a map of cities and stuff in the state, boroughs, tried to enlarge that. I certainly couldn't read the first one, so we had to make it a little bit bigger for you to look at. That's just sort of ancillary information. I think that really interesting is the legislative flow chart that's included in the packet. Kind of gives you a step-by-step and all of the legal code citations for that process. And then in the last 3 pages there are, we have a couple of studies on boroughs. One from 1988 here and one from 1997. Those are pretty large, so I didn't include those for your reading pleasure. But if you want to see those are available in my office. As I said, on December 6th, we're going to have the full resolution and budget for your discussion on December 6th. Again, we're streaming live. We're doing both the work session and the council meetings. And then I'm working with Kathy just for the general public. I intend to have a sort of a budget town hall meeting of sorts coming up where I'm going to be available to on screen walk people who want to know through the budget process and how we arrived at where we arrived at, including the strategic plan and our thoughts, sort of the philosophical part as well as the practical part of it. So look for those dates, and we'll have those. We'll try to advertise that as widely as possible. That's all I have, unless you have any questions.
Okay, clerk's report.
So with certification of the election coming up, that closes a chapter of what we've been working a lot on. So it went very well. The election workers, very professional as usual, easy to work with. Wasn't a huge turnout, so easy tallying, and it wasn't a crazy late night. And then there are two. One of the items in council's budget that got zeroed out for 17, and I think zeroed for 18, is dues and subscriptions. And I just got a bill from UFA, which we have joined in the past, is $300, and then Southeast Conference, which we joined, we kind of got re-affiliated with them and then made a donation to the program they're doing on the ferry reform. And that was like $2,900, so I don't know what you guys want to do, maybe at maybe at council comments, or maybe at some point you can tell us to find the funds, which we probably can find somewhere, but, or forego it if it wasn't specifically budgeted for. I think that's about all I have. Well, the boards and commissions, I guess Mr. Beadle will bring up the Historic Preservation Commission when that item comes up. I can answer questions about it.
I have a question for you, Susan. With our donation that we did to the Southeast Conference, was there, I think, when we were doing it, there was like for what we put in, as far as an amount to be a part of that, was there like a certain amount of, like, it got our name on something and like put us in there? Is that why we chose something like that?
I believe, well, that was specifically for the reform project.
Mm-hmm.
I meant to look to see the last time we actually joined Southeast Conference as a member, and I know this letter may be the first time I've gotten it in a couple of years, but it gives us a certain amount of votes at Southeast Conference because of population and fee. And years ago, I think it was based on the ferry as well, we joined, and actually, you know, I think the mayor at the time was attending those meetings. I think it was when we had the same, oh, that's when it was, when we had Bill Harris and we were in their, Thomas, in their district. After reorganization or whatever you call that last time.
Yeah, Southeast Conference is, they have several committees, energy and transportation and whatnot, but our climate and our demographics and our, you know, economies are so much similar. And I would love to Cordova to, if we continue to participate, which I would probably recommend, I would love to see them host a Southeast Conference here. I think it's attended by 100 to 150 individuals. It's kind of midsummer, June-ish, July-ish, which might actually kind of be a gap in our hotels and whatnot, but that's a big week-long event, so.
I concur. I think it'd be very valuable to Cordova, and we do share a lot of the same interests as far as the ferry goes. So in that sense, their interests are our interests.
Yeah, I was just trying to state, like, with our amount of funding, it put us in there to let people know that we're a part of this system, even though we're not technically Southeast. Right. Yeah, so I really think we're doing this to try and get our value out of it and be known as a Alaska Marine Highway town or someone that needs it.
So we don't really have this as an action item, and it's a fairly small item, but it sounds like there's kind of a nod to the manager to find room in the budget.
That's
for
fine.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And try to get them to host it here.
Yeah. Ulterior motive. UFA, pretty minimal. Find that too. $300.
And we have been a member of UFA in the past, so.
And try to get them to host that here too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doesn't that kind of, I mean, that gives us information too, though.
Yeah.
You know, with being a member of UFA, it's not finding something out later. We're kind of in the loop. And we are a fishing community, and they're the statewide, so.
Okay, I think I'm seeing nods all around on that one as well, so.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Okay, we have correspondence entered into the packet. Next item, ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance 1161, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cordova, Alaska, amending Cordova Municipal Code sections, a lot of them, 1.04.255, 1.20.010, 2.20.010, 2.24.010, 2.48.120, 2.56.017, 3.14.020, 3.40.090, 4.12.030, 5.12.110, 5.14.020, 5.24.040, 5.32.080, 5.32.150, 5.36.110, 5.40.150, 10.52.030, 10.52.050, 10.54.40, 10.54.0.0, 11.32.050, 13.24.030, 17.24.040, 18.68.030, and 18.72.080 to define the term publish and to clarify the notice and publication requirements under the Cordova Municipal Code. First reading. And now you get a little insight into the clerk's world. When you move one marble, all their interrelated codes that get touched. So what's the will of council on that ordinance?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Weiss.
I would like to add not into the.
That's not even on the record yet. Do you want?
It's just.
Oh, okay.
Just move it.
For purposes of discussion, move to adopt ordinance, nothing to do.
Okay, have a motion to adopt.
Second.
And a second, discussion?
Yeah, we had Ms. Jewel come up. I would like to see an amendment where these ordinance changes allow us to use e-news in multiple electronic methods. I would like including the Cordova website added to satisfy the requirements of state laws and city municipal charter.
Okay.
Where? Do you know where in the ordinance? Because I feel like that's just a memo. So in the ordinance, I believe on page 14, yeah, publish means to appear in an internet, print, or broadcast medium that contains news of general interest to the community. I believe the city website would.
I think the objective is to remove the requirement that you have to post everything in a physical newspaper. But I believe it's written to allow us to use all media and broadcast functions available to us, which would be physical newspapers, e-news, Facebook, billboards, whatever we determine, because right now state law defines publish as a newspaper of general circulation. And by interpretation, that would mean only one place for us for many of the things that we do. So we're just trying to open up our opportunities for us and not have that physical requirement on us for everything.
Councilman Beadle.
Okay, so I'm a little confused now. So for clarification, we're not eliminating publishing it in the newspaper. We're just adding additional places to publish it.
We're not eliminating anything. It doesn't mean that we're going to publish particular notices in the newspaper, because state law says that certain things have to be published, shall be published in a newspaper of general circulation. We only have one of those. So for certain things, it would alleviate the requirement for us, and we can make those choices internally about where it best serves us. For example, a local ordinance about something that it doesn't do us any good to publish that in certain places, but it does have an impact locally if you use the newspaper or other print media or other media here. That's what we're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to say it guarantees that we have to publish in the newspaper, no, it doesn't.
Okay, I'm just, first I was kind of excited when I seen it. I thought, oh great, because my time on the council, well, we published it, or we posted it in the post office, or we posted it out front here. So I thought, okay, we're finally going to expand it, you know. But I hate to see it pare down any what might be good for you or you might not be good for me or you. So I really think I looked in the paper, I seen a lot of stuff here where it'd be posted in the hallway up here. That might be good for some people, but I just feel that it's super important that our notices go out and that we maximize our opportunity for them to get noticed.
That's exactly what we're trying to do, because state law limits you. We're trying to expand our offerings to officially say publish means if we had something that was appropriate for the e-news and we published it in the e-news, that would serve as a record of general circulation, in addition to posting up in the lobby, in addition to wherever else we chose to put that. They all serve under the term of publish.
Okay, but then there's this, I just don't want the newspaper cut out. I use it personally for a lot of the notice and stuff. I don't always, I'm fishing. I take the newspaper out with me. It might be 2-3 days later. And it's kind of a record for me that I could go back and look at easy enough. So I just, yeah, I just don't want to see the method of noticing cut out, and then just I would like a consensus of, you know, what's it will or what needs to be, so that we're not, well, we decided it wasn't important in the paper, so we're not going to point it no more. You know, what would they be?
Councilman Beadle? If council doesn't mind if I just interject something about policy. One of the things that when I was on council that they presented in newly elected officers training is that council considers and adopts policy, and staff interprets and administers policy, recommends and interprets policy. So what that means is this is written fairly generally. In fact, it's making it less specific, as the manager mentioned, so that it allows you to publish on the city website and in other electronic media, but it doesn't require you. It doesn't require you to publish in a newspaper, but it doesn't prevent it either. So that just gives the staff flexibility. For instance, if you write in here, it has to be published on the city website. If you've got your city website down for maintenance for a week, or it's crashed or something, you are legally bound to publish it on your website. And so if you leave it general, but then convey to the staff, this is what council wants. We want to support our local newspaper. We want to have it on the website. We want to, then the council sees what your intention is with the policy. And that's what this discussion is doing for them. But then you don't necessarily have to amend this and make it that specific. So I just wanted to, I know we haven't had a newly elected officers training in the budget and whatnot, but I just wanted to interject.
Well, I just see in the notes and stuff, they're talking about the fiscal impacts of advertising in the paper, and we could save money. And I think my intent is not to lessen any. If we're going to expand, great, but don't be taken away. The newspaper's been a fantastic opportunity to get notices for a multitude of people. There's people that don't live here in the wintertime that get a subscription that still, you know.
Okay, maybe we can carry that back to the main motion, and right now the amendment is to publish on the city website.
Did you make an official amendment, or?
I never got second.
No.
I think, yeah, I didn't, that's what I was asking you. I didn't hear a second, and then, okay.
Well, I thought he just.
Because I think you had asked him, where would you put it in here, and then we kind of started down this path, so I'm trying to drag us back onto the, so
Did you find a place you did want to put that, or do you agree that it's in?
No,
this page? It's on this definition. It does say.
I think we've had the discussion for staff to interpret it.
So you understand, okay, got it.
So I didn't hear a second, but Councilman Jones.
Well, if you don't have a amendment on the table currently, okay, I would like to offer an amendment. I'm not exactly sure how, seeing as there's so many different ordinances that are, or lines of code that are affected, but I would like to keep the requirement of publication in a newspaper of general circulation. But at the same time, there are some changes in here that I like that broaden, you know, for instance, there's on page 20, section 12, publication, posting the notice of sale on the bulletin board in City Hall and posting the notice of sale on one other public place. I like that. I just would hate to see us move away from advertising in the paper, I guess, is where I'm at with this. I appreciate the fact that it would save a little bit of money, but like Councilman Beadle has stated, there's still people, and I know it's the 21st century and the day and ages of using the internet, but there are still people who rely on the newspaper for their source of information. I'm not sure how that amendment would work, or if we just should refer this back to staff and have them come back with a different ordinance. Anyways, looking for guidance there.
Well, is there a second on the amendment?
There's a second on that.
The motion that's on the floor?
The motion on the floor right now is to publish in the local newspaper intact.
That's my amendment. We need a second.
Second.
Okay, second. So.
That's a pretty vague amendment. I'm not
Yeah,
you would understand. If you'd
yeah.
rather refer to staff, but have a little more conversation so we
For the next reading?
what to bring back.
Okay.
In those lines, you know, the newspaper's been bought and sold, and it has been in circulation since, I think, 1910? 1914. So instead of, you know, just newspapers, if available, you know, if something happens in the future, technology gets to the point where newspapers aren't as relevant and it's not profitable anymore, then we don't have to come back and look at it. But I just, like I said at the beginning, I was excited we were going to get more. We weren't going to be taking away from notices. And in fact, I pushed before trying to get a big monitor, a screen up there that you can do the typing on, and where people drive by and see it. So I want to see, I don't want to take anything away.
Okay, so you're in favor of keeping the newspaper piece in there as
most definitely
a requirement? Okay. Any discussion opposed to that?
Well, I guess maybe Mr. Lannon can, he can, I guess, discuss why you guys are trying to go away from the newspaper. Is it just more flexibility, or
I think there's an interpretation that we're trying to go away from the newspaper. I don't think that's what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
It says, if you look on page 14, the definition of publish. I think sums up the entire condition here. It makes all of these available. Here's my best example. When we sell impounded, seized property in our last sale, we made, try to get my numbers correct here, $640, and we spent $400 plus advertising it. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to correct. But we're not trying, and their submission generally falls, you know, Facebook gets them more looks, other media is better for them because there's followers. That's the kind of thing we're trying to correct. We're not trying to say we have this ordinance and we need to publish this ordinance. We're not trying to say that we're not going to put it in the newspaper. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to make the definition of publish to include everything available to us. we understand, you know, the local newspaper, and we're not trying to do that harm to them. We're just trying to make corrections where it's appropriate to us. I mean, that's kind of, you know, on the spectrum of really bad, really good. You know, saying that we're trying to cut out the newspaper is kind of on the really bad side, and that's not, I just say that's not what we're trying to do.
I just signed a bill today for $1,480 for 3 ads for this election, this special election, and there are 2 more coming. So it was a lot more on this special election, and our regular election this year was a lot more. Because there was a time when we had a flat contract and the city had a half or 3/4 or maybe even sometimes a whole page. And it was a lot easier because we obviously got everything in that we needed to get in, but then even some of the more fluff things we'd put in there every now and then and add to it and get a little extra stuff because we had the space and we were paid for it for the year. So possibly this ordinance would be okay, and we could, maybe you guys would prefer us to go back to a flat rate with them, maybe at less than what we had, but something that would still cover a lot of the things that we used to put in the paper would all still be in the paper.
Because I would offer that if you want to designate the newspaper as the official publish, then just deny the ordinance and be done with it. And we will just continue down the path that we're already on. And we're working right now, regardless, we are working extraordinarily hard to, you know, expand and increase the value of e-news and some of the other things our website things that we have available to us. I classify these things as local interest. We're always going to put local interest things in the local paper.
I don't know that it behooves us to.
Microphone, please, yeah.
I don't know that it behooves us to throw out everything with this. I think we pretty well covered it in the mayor's statement that we set policy from here. But the bigger tool basket we have to work with, the better. So I don't see that adopting this ordinance and still using Cordova Times for publishing needs are exclusive of one another.
So, regarding the amendment, would you be opposed to or in favor of amending it, or amending it to require the newspaper advertising?
I'm still trying to get clear in my head what all things.
So currently, before we change anything, requires a newspaper. With what I want to amend is, you know, there's some good language in here that adds new things. I would just want to amend it to, you know, keep those new things that are great, bulletin boards and all that, but to eliminate striking the newspaper line in code for all these codes. I think that the proper way to do that would be to just refer it back to staff and bring a new one. So that's why I was trying to say I need a little guidance there, but that's the way I would want to go with this. I don't want to see us move away from the paper.
But there may be some things that are more appropriate, like the auction stuff he was talking about, or
yeah.
I mean, I'm not real clear in my head yet on what all. I'd have to put some more thought into what all we need to be advertising and stuff, and I don't know that all of it needs to be exclusively the paper, but I really don't want to see a lot of movement away from the paper either, because it's a place we're all used to looking for public information.
Councilman Weiss?
I would just suggest the easiest way to do this is, you know, all this literature for what we can or can't put in the paper. that's not the right way to put it, for what? Everything we want to figure out if we change is right here, so we revert this back to staff and figure out if we want to strike using or not using the newspaper in certain sections. We just add that in with our suggestions for our next meeting, right? I mean, it's like for our notice of impounded property. If that's something that you wanted to see advertised in all our social media methods and everything, including the newspaper, we just come back and read them in. But reverting back to staff is kind of our way to get past this.
Okay.
The night.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess the other option would be, if we do pass this, to then give staff the direction that we want to continue taking, or maybe approach the newspaper with a negotiation of, we want to get a contract for a full year like we used to. I know that it's been bought and sold since those days, but if the issue is the amount we're spending on advertising, there's other ways. I mean, there's ways to address that, even, you know, with or without this.
Councilman Beadle.
It just, there's too many times you hear that I didn't see it, I didn't know there was a meeting. Like I said, I was excited to see that there was more. Down the road, is the city news thing going to continue? I look at Facebook once a month, and 3 hours later I wonder what I looked at, and you know, it's to go in and find a city notice. I'd just like to see everything in here where it strikes out the newspaper lifted. The other options of start growing it. Maybe it's too quick and too soon to start striking the newspaper. Working to a 5-year plan. Is it gonna, at some point, is the newspaper gonna be only online? But take a tried and true method that we rely on now for notifications to end. You know, when would this be implemented? As soon as we passed it?
Okay, Council, I'm trying to facilitate moving this forward, but I think we're starting to repeat ourselves.
And I said, you know,
so I understand. So I mean, you've made that point that you would like to see it in the paper. What I was suggesting on the policy thing is, it's going to take a lot of work for council to go through here on all these and look at each piece and where the paper shows up and doesn't show up. Again, the separation between policy and execution is, if you want a policy that's flexible and allows the manager to have flexibility and still communicate to them that we don't want to, we want to continue to advertise in the paper, we want to continue to advertise in all forms of medium, but we want you to do it cost effectively, then you're putting it in his hands to do, and it can maybe just go forward the way it is. If you want to specifically pin down the newspaper part, which is what the amendment you have in front of you is right now, then I think you've probably got enough direction that you don't want to strike anything in here about the newspaper part. You want to kind of keep that embedded in here. So.
Perhaps, and I'll throw another wrench into this. Perhaps we could just say no to the ordinance, and I'll come back with, no, I'm going to be facetious, and I intend this to be funny. Perhaps I could come back with a chart of 29 exemptions and exceptions to what we advertise that we could debate and try to be funny. Maybe that would be easier to scrap it, and then we come back and say, here's the things that we want flexibility on. And then we don't have to.
You know, another thing I would be interested in seeing is, it says here in the memo, not sure what page I had it on here, that you know, the budgeted cost is approximately $1,500, but if, you know, it's got to be way more than that. So I'd be curious to see what the total cost really is, just for sake of information.
And the 20,000 flat was a previous owner, so I have no idea what a flat rate could even be, and possibly we got too good of a deal at 20K.
Councilman Gardner.
I'd make a motion that we adopt the ordinance as written and direct staff
Okay,
to,
point of
That's
order-
already on
Point of
the-
order, we have an amendment on the floor right now.
I think we have to vote on the amendment.
What was the amendment?
The amendment was made and seconded to just not strike the newspaper so that it's left in there as a requirement that it's published in the newspaper. Is that right?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we should amend it
General.
or if we should have a motion to refer back to staff. That's what I was looking for direction on.
can I ask one question?
Councilman
I
Gard.
won't make motion this time. Would it meet everybody's requirements for this if we adopted the motion as written and directed staff to enter negotiations with the paper to buy a weekly, half-page, quarter-page, full-page, whatever we decided we wanted, because it sounds like.
So this is a first reading, so it's gonna come back again. In the meantime, staff can go look at what the pricing would be to have a newspaper contract. And, but I guess to move this forward, there's a motion and a second. I've heard two kind of in favor of the newspaper part. Is there anyone opposed to doing that? Or do you wanna just take that to a vote so we can, is anyone speak in opposition to that? Because I think staff's heard some direction now, so. Okay, all those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Opposed?
I don't think either way takes it away. Nay. We still have the paper. Sorry.
Okay, so he's not voting, so that's a no, so it's a fail,
So it
because
fails.
it's a tie.
Okay, so now the main motion, or the main,
Oh wait, that's a lie. Are you voting or not? Because if you're
You have to.
not voting, it's a yes.
You have to.
You cannot abstain. If you abstain, it's a yes. To amend.
Well, it kind of takes, to leave the requirement for the paper takes away any flexibility.
It allows it to grow. What they're saying is,
No,
they're gonna
it takes
be.
away.
well, point of order, Councilman Gard is voting, so it sounds like a no. Is that a?
I'll vote in favor of the motion.
Okay, so the amendment is to leave the newspaper in there.
Okay,
Is
that's
that,
too vague. You have to explain.
okay, well, I'm asking the manager if
Okay.
that's specific enough.
Well, I would offer that what we're gonna try to do then is we're gonna try to go back through here and we're gonna try to guess which sections you wanna retain and not retain. And it would certainly be helpful to us to have more specificity about what your interests are. If you wanna, that's why I said it would be easier to
Fail the whole thing.
fail the whole thing and allow us to bring exceptions to you that we would prefer, we would recommend, then, because.
So for clarity, just to help a little bit, so if you anticipate that you're gonna go through a foreclosure process and advertising in the newspaper is gonna cost more than the revenues you recover, that would be one of the exceptions. And you would have to go through this whole thing and kind of decide which one, where are the places where it'd be good to advertise in the paper, where are places where you wouldn't recommend advertising in the paper. And that's gonna be an administrative effort.
Yes.
Okay, so.
I just, I'd rather do a couple things. I'd rather define for you what we'd like to accept with an EX. And I'd rather enter into negotiations to see if we can come to some pricing favorability for the city rather than, again, if we get too far down the road, because everything we do here has to be approved by the attorney. And before we know it, we've spent more money than it's worth. And it's,
Does that help?
Yeah, well, the amendment passed, so that's where now it's really muddy, the water. I was more looking for guidance than
We've got another reading.
yeah.
Yeah.
We did an amendment to the amendment.
Well, no, I was just, maybe we should just refer this back to staff, or,
Let's start with that. Let's just refer it back to staff, and we'll come back with something new for you, and it'll be a first reading.
yeah.
If we even have anything. So we'll figure out the procedure if you want to refer it back to us, and we'll go from there.
Your Mayor,
Councilman Weiss.
I would move to refer this back to staff.
Have a motion to refer this to staff in a second. Would you like to discuss your motion?
No, I think we have.
Yeah. Discussion?
One thing I would like to say is, you know, if we had something else to say that you were going to negotiate with the paper to get a full page ad, or, you know, something, I could vote for this if we still had something in place to keep the information that you see, you know, you think is prudent to be in the paper. If we had something like that in front of us at the same time, then I could be persuaded to vote as written, but I don't want to vote for it not having that in place, I guess, is where I'm at.
Okay. So any further discussion to refer? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Next item is Resolution 11-17-28, certification of the official results of the November 7th, 2017 special election. It's a resolution with the full ballot counts, which was passed out for the meeting. So this end, what's the will of council?
So would we make a motion to certify the election, or would we make a motion to adopt resolution 11-17-28?
Second of those two.
Yeah, the second of those. Motion to adopt resolution.
I make a motion that we adopt resolution 11-17-28.
Second.
Have a motion and second. Councilman Gard, would you like to speak to your motion?
Kind of a sad turn of events, but well, the voters have spoken, so I guess that's about all that needs to be said.
Councilman Beadle?
The resolution online and the one in my packet is incomplete, and for the just for the community to know the total absentee count and the total vote, at least read it into record or something so that the people online are to know the total. It has it on there.
Okay, so I'll just read this for the record. Proposition 1, shall Josh Hallquist be recalled from the office of City Council member? The ballots cast at the polls that were published were 217 yeas and 99 nays. The absentee count that was performed this morning, of 22 votes, 19 were yeas and 3 were nays. So the final total was 236 yeas and 102 nays, and that's what the results would be that this resolution would certify. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the resolution passes. Next item is unfinished business, the Harbor Department information on the used oil processing building on page 29.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Beadle.
I move to approve the resolution 10-1701 from the Cordova Harbor Commission of Cordova, Alaska, a resolution of the Harbor Commission of the City of Cordova, Alaska to Cordova City Council requesting allocation of $200,000 from the Harbor Reserve Fund for the building of the used oil processing warehouse.
That's not really what's happening here.
That's the
That's just
resolution.
in there as information. That's not a resolution of the, approve the resolution?
Approve to allocate.
Okay, is that, I wasn't quite sure what this item is.
you're allowing the allocation because the resolution is from the Harbor Commission.
Yeah.
And we don't have a resolution in the packet, but it's approving the direction of the harbor for an allocation.
So,
and we're gonna do that by motion and vote.
So maybe a good recommended motion, Susan, on page 30, right under item 2, under recommended action is move to approve allocation of $200,000 from the Harbor Reserve Fund to construct a used oil processing warehouse.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Beadle.
I'm gonna say no, and my thinking on that is we're taking money out of a permanent fund, and it's gonna take 7 votes, so are we gonna need something?
No, we're not taking.
No, this is the Harbor Enterprise Fund.
Yeah.
Their version of the permanent fund.
It's just the reserve fund, yeah, we're gonna take it out of there.
But that, that doesn't require
We need to that's what you need to work on, is where the reserve fund, the general fund, the appreciation fund, to kind of get those in an order where we can call a spade a spade.
Well, Councilman Beadle, there's a recommended action here.
I get that, but I'm just, I wanted to.
Well, just for clarification, that just requires a majority of council. It doesn't require a supermajority. So your motion was to basically adopt a Harbor Commission ordinance, but that's a resolution of the Harbor Commission. So I'm just clarifying your motion. And is that your intent to move to approve allocation of $200,000 from the Harbor's reserve fund to construct a used oil processing?
Most definitely.
Okay.
Second.
And there's a second. Councilman Beadle, would you like to speak to that motion?
In a tough budget year, there's money in the reserve, what do you call it? In the Harbor Reserve Fund to do this. We're not putting a burden on the people at the Baylor plant to deal with oil. There's just a lot of positives. You can get the harbor rolling stock under a building, adding life to it. There's just a lot of positives that, and better quality of oil, if we can get the schools, and the harbor will be using it also. So I think it's a win-win. The money being saved, that it's a no-brainer.
Further discussion?
I just, I would reflect to Mr. Beadle's comments. I think it's a no-brainer, and there's many pros, and I don't really see any cons.
Just Councilman Beadle, one last statement is, Mr. Baylor had a very good point there, is a lot of these buildings, we have Weston and Mr. Chanella, they're going to be knowing what they want, and the building can be engineered by the supplier.
Yeah.
And just for value, instead of adding another layer of complexity, and it'd be nice too if you can go right back to the supplier if something's wrong, but it would be definitely built to the city code. Yeah, so for the bang for the buck, I really recommend Mr. Baylor's suggestion. I think it would give more value to the whole project too.
Councilman Jones?
I just have, I guess, one question. I know with some native corporations, they can allow for local or native preference for hiring and stuff. Is there any way we can allow for local preference for whoever's going to erect this thing, or is that something the city can't do? I'm just curious.
RFP, whoever bids, we have to consider.
Yeah. But there's you can allow for locals to be 10% higher or something,
Susan,
there's a provision of
I think there is a provision in the code
for
that. So Up to 10%.
I'd have to look at that. I haven't seen it recently yet.
Okay.
But I could be wrong in this, but I think constitutionally state-wise, we've had issues with trying to mandate state and local hire before, and it's, every time it's been before the Supreme Court, it's been toasted. I'm all in favor of it, don't get me wrong, but I just don't know how we can legally mandate it.
Okay.
I was just curious how it works, so.
They just get a preference, you know, if they were in that range that they talked about, you know.
If it's in the code, it's something staff can certainly consider. So.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Councilman Gard.
One question. I'm all in favor of the project, and I'm not talking against it, but we haven't got a very concise plan here for what we're doing. It's kind of loose. Are we intentionally leaving it?
I don't have a good answer for that. I wasn't intentionally leaving it loose. Well, the first part is just to build a building that will contain. We're going to have other steps in this along the way.
But we're not talking. We don't specify the size of building we're looking at. And square footage.
Yeah, I think
we can build it for 107.
I think the first step, and the one that I asked for, was to just give us the authority for the money, and then we're going to have to come back with you with the plan. We just needed the authority first.
Okay.
And really, you know, considering $200,000, what you've already done, strategic plan, 2017, 60,000 budgeted for this process. 2018, another 60,000 budgeted for this process. So really the difference for you is only 80 grand. So planning ahead is something that we started back when we were talking about strategic plan. Actually, you guys started this way earlier than that. So we'll bring you the plan of the building and what it looks like, the size, the dimensions, the cost, all of those things.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, we added under new and miscellaneous business, actually we moved from the consent agenda, the continuation of and membership adjustments to the Cordova Historic Preservation Commission on page 1. I just inserted that as item 14A under new business. What's the will of council?
Trying to find what I read online. It's a different, oh, here you go. My concern isn't necessarily the members and the shuffling around of the P&Z rep and all that. It's the process.
Okay, so do you have a motion, Councilman Beadle?
How do I say it here? I wanted to go back and move through the process of, just like the rest of the vacancies process.
Okay, so basically go out and advertise for a vacancy on the Historic Preservation Commission.
There's that, and then there's 2 vacancies. And you step down as a seat as a P&Z rep on the commission. So there's 2 seats, but the process is what it's all about, what protects us, and if we don't follow our process,
Okay, so the motion is to advertise for the vacancy on a Historic Preservation Commission and for the P&Z representative to the commission.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Can we pass the first part? Do you see how that was kind of a threefold?
Yeah, I was looking for the third one there, so.
The continue the existence of the Historic Preservation Commission. By code, we have to do that at the first meeting in November every year, or the commission ceases to exist in 30 days. So we didn't do it at the first meeting in November, but we're within the 30 days, so I thought I'd throw it in there this time.
Okay.
I move to continue the existence of the Historic
We
Preservation
got
Commission.
a motion on the floor.
Yeah, we do have a motion on the floor. Did you want to add that third item in there, Councilman Beadle, to approve the existence of the commission?
Yes, and then approve, yes. I mean, yes.
Okay, so do number one and then advertise the vacancies.
Yes, you have to have the commission in place before we advertise a vacancy for it, so.
Second.
In second, thank you. Discussion, Councilman Beadle?
There again, it's just a process. You know, I thank Susan for stepping in and trying to speed the things up, but if we don't do our process and follow our procedures, where are we? I mean, we just,
okay.
You know.
Further discussion? And with the permission of the motion and second, I'd just do these in two pieces. Vote first on the first piece and then on the second piece.
No. Motion.
Okay, all at once. Councilman Guard?
Well, I'm not saying them all at once. I wasn't averse to what you were saying. But I was just saying, I mean, we haven't got that many P&Z members to be choosing between. We've got one that has a history with the the Preservation Commission, and Nancy Bird. I don't know how much we need to vote on that. I mean, that would. Oh, this is gonna be long. I'm done.
Okay, I think maybe, would it be helpful for, okay, let's leave it alone. Any further discussion? Councilman Beadle?
You're assuming by not following process, there might be another member of the community that has the option, and to say that, okay, there's not a lot of people in P&Z. Well, there is other members. And we need to follow our process. On our next items coming up here, we have you know, a bunch of boards and commissions with vacancies that expired, that we went through a process to come up with members, multiple members in most of them, recommendations that the council can, but this here was basically, we're bypassing all our process, and you know, there might be other people that would like to be on there. We're denying that opportunity. So not that these people, believe me, I don't doubt that either one of them would do a fine job. My concern is, where do we go? Do we let it slide this time, and the next time we have a process?
Just for clarification, process is a practice. It's not a code requirement. So I just want to be clear, the clerk isn't suggesting something that violates code. I think she's trying, and what I said, I'll leave it alone. I was just going to ask her to clarify why she presented it in this manner. And I think it's so that a commission that's only appointed year to year on a basis, that had someone that was on it and stepped back off, she was looking at saving on the advertising cost. And that's fine if council wants to go through the process of allowing others. That's the motion on the floor. So I just want to clarify, though, that we're not violating code or anything. It's just a practice, and you'd like to see that. So
I don't totally agree, but that's your opinion. So,
well, I just want to make it clear, if you're accusing staff of not following the code.
No, I'm just saying that in this case, it wasn't our practice, our policy, whatever you want to call it. wasn't being followed. And we have examples later in the agenda of how to do it, that we've done it. So,
okay. All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. So we'll advertise for those vacancies and bring them back on a next agenda, future meeting.
There was a letter from Jim Casement. Do we have to have people that have subjected or supplied letters been already resubmit?
I don't think so. We can just carry that forward. We'll just ask if there's any additional letters of interest and make that available to the public. And then I guess just for clarification then, Susan, if you know offhand, does the mayor recommend those?
Yes.
So if we get more letters or requests in our positions, I'll just recommend which ones. So. Okay, so item 15 then, council concurrence of mayor's appointments to boards and commissions, page 33. What's the will of the council?
I move that we appoint the mayor's recommendations to the Harbor Commission, Parks and Rec, and Planning and Zoning Commission.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councilman Gard?
No, I think they pretty well speak for themselves.
Okay, discussion?
Other than to thank everybody for submitting their letters. No, none. I'm glad we're getting these volunteers.
Councilman Jones?
You know, I appreciate the mayor going through and taking the time to bring forth these recommendations. I do have one issue regarding the Harbor Commission. I just hate to see Robert off of there. He's the one that got the Harbor Commission meeting again. He's a very effective chairman of the Harbor Commission. So yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. Councilman Gard?
Yeah, this is, my motion for this was no diss at all, but Robert, what I've got an issue with, and we've talked about this before, is having council members be voting members of boards and commissions that are meeting and making recommendations to them. I think we put ourselves on really shaky legal ground by doing that, because you come to a vote with the decision already made on a process because you've done the process before everybody else. I have no problems as an ex officio member, a non-voting member. I don't even care if the non-voting member is the chair of the commission or the meeting, but I have stated before I've got worries about that, or legal exposure to that.
Councilman Beadle?
Yeah, I too am bummed. I'm going to have a hard time arguing. I think both these guys are excellent. I don't agree with you on the voting part. If you're on the Harbor Commission, if you're on the Parks and Rec, yes, you've got information and you're going to bring back the vote. There's other members there that, you know, you're just one vote. You're not the vote. But if you're on the Harbor Commission, you're probably going to push for things at the Harbor Commission when it comes to the council. Okay. But I would like to talk, maybe I'll do it in the council comments, but I'm bummed. Ken, you're gonna have to step up. I recommend reading the code, know what your responsibilities, and it's not the Harbor Masters, it's the Harbor Commission's meeting. I wish you luck. Like I said, I don't concur or agree, but They're both fine, they're all great people that are applying, so. And you know what? I actually had a thought about it, I'd be off, and you know what? My heart kind of lightened up a little bit. The stress, it's been a long uphill battle on there. Just keeping it going, getting work done so that you have something to go back to DC with. But with that, I'll reluctantly, but I'll agree. They're good men.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Discussion of council election to fill a vacancy in council seat F.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Beadle, sorry.
That's council seat E.
Oop, need my glasses. Council seat E.
I see that it's hard.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Beadle.
Unfortunately, we've had a recall. It's passed now and moving forward. But that seat's been vacant for a long time. There's been a lot of big decisions made. Everybody's voice is important. Votes for permanent fund, they're all important. I don't always agree. They don't always agree with me, but that's not the point is that there's a full council and we're moving things, the city's business forward. With that, and only 4 months left till election, I'd recommend moving somebody in that's got experience, could fill out the 4 months without having to do a learning curve. We've already been without the 7th council member for quite a while. I'd like to recommend
for about 15 minutes, Councilman Beadle, just since you certified the election. Right?
Yeah.
That was vacated
Correct.
Tonight, just about 20 minutes ago.
But the seat's been empty technically. He hasn't showed up. We've been without
Those have been excused absences mostly.
Yeah.
Is this a discussion item or an action?
No, I'm waiting for the motion. I didn't mean to
But there
interrupt.
shouldn't be a motion.
I just want to clarify.
It's a discussion item, remember?
Yes.
Yes, and I'd like to recommend that Tom Baylor be appointed to the seat. We can get moving forward. He's got experience. He's chaired the meetings before. He knows, he sat through strategic planning. He's got history. And there again, it's only 4 months. If we appoint somebody new to break him in, why not wait till election when they got 3 years to learn? But for now, for what we got facing us, I recommend, and the other choice, Tim Joyce, he's made it pretty clear that he wants to go home. He wants to go with his family, which isn't in Cordova. So,
Councilman Gardner.
I'll recommend that.
I think they're great recommendations. I think Tom did a great job when he was on here, and I think we'd be lucky to have him back. But I think process that you were talking about before is an important thing to go through. So if we're going to be appointing somebody to a seat, we ought to look for letters of interest. I think throwing somebody in the last couple weeks of budget process is not doing anybody's any favors.
And just for clarification, it was councilmen that requested that this be put on the agenda, and they specifically asked that it be put on for a discussion of how to fill the seat by following the process, because
It's funny that process is being thrown back when we can't have trouble before, so.
Oh, we agreed with you and we all voted with you.
This,
Before, Robert.
in the past, when there was a vacant seat, if there was, we filled it. We didn't have to go out and, there was times when there was 2 people who drew it out of the hat. It's not a.
That's when a regular election causes a vacancy.
So on the next agenda, I'm just going to suggest, Councilman Beadle's suggestion is to appoint former Councilman Baylor. That could be an action item on the next agenda, or in the interim, you could advertise for that position, and those sound like the two suggestions on the table so far, so. Councilman Weiss.
I would suggest that we use it, we ask for letters of interest and put it on an action item for our next meeting.
Councilman Jones.
I would agree that we should follow the process. I think that Tom would be a great asset to have back at this table, and I hope that he chooses to put in a letter of interest. And I just think that we should go out, ask for a letter of interest, and then bring those letters back and pick somebody at the next meeting.
Okay, it sounds like there's concurrence. The council would like to see letters of interest, and they'd like one of those to be from former Councilman Baylor.
So for clarification, so we would get letters of interest for the next meeting, and they wouldn't be appointed, they would be appointed at that meeting or the meeting after, so.
I looked at the calendar, and Susan would start advertising tomorrow. She'd have the cutoff by November 29th. That would be a full 2 weeks of advertising, and that would give it time to go into the packet for the December 6th, the first December regular meeting.
And
so it would be the next regular meeting.
Could we appoint them at the beginning of that meeting?
So that they could be a voting member? That's not a bad idea.
We could do it at the front of the.
We could do it at the front of the agenda. It's a good suggestion.
All my concern is just that we have another voice, a full council, moving things forward. Mr. Baylor doesn't always agree with me. It's to keep things going, and it is only 4 months to.
Okay, it sounds like we'll get there. Item 17, pending agenda, calendar, and elected and appointed officials list. Page 47. And we talked about making sure we captured a suggestion for the pending agenda in the work session. And Councilman Jones.
You know, I would like to see some sort of a discussion. I guess it's already kind of in here about the discussion and action item or action regarding water changes at the harbor. Is that the waterfront or is that the water bill? I guess I'm a little confused on that, but I would like to see a discussion about waterfront and you know, it could be 3 months from now. I just would like to see it on our coming up down the pike after we get the budget done, when we start looking at our strategic plan again. You know, we've got a big mud flat that needs to get filled. You know, we've got a waterfront that can be developed. Harbor upgrades, everything. You know, I'd like to see that as a discussion in the future. Also on here, have we been in contact with the Science Center regarding relocation?
We're actively working with them.
Things are moving forward there. Okay.
It's in their report.
Is there any way we can get updates or something on that, so we're not, you know, just, I mean, even executive session or something, so that instead of wondering, and there's so many things that, I mean, you've talked about campers and campgrounds and stuff, and we're still working in my mind different things, and you know, if we can get updates on those kind of things, it'd be, get it off my list. What were we asking in oh, the UBS, the
RFP for investment services.
yes,
Yeah.
I'll put that on there. And then NVE is asking for a joint meeting. They've given me a bunch of dates.
Yeah.
November 20th, 21st, 22nd. I believe CEC meets the 22nd, or did you change? You changed?
That's tomorrow night, so I don't have a meeting next week, so.
Okay, so that would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, right?
Yeah.
Then they said December 4th through 8th.
So we have a regular meeting on the 6th.
But we have a work session already on that day with DOT on the Whiteshed Road.
Yeah. On the 6th.
On the 6th.
Yeah.
And then they put these 2 weeks out there too, 18th to the 22nd and 26th to 29th. I don't know what people's holiday plans are. 18th to the 22nd, we could do it previous to the December 20th meeting as the work session, because budget should be done And I don't know if you had something else planned for a work session.
Did you say in November it was the 21st, 22nd? Or that?
20th, 21st, 22nd, if you want to do it sooner.
I'd
One of
prefer
those
to
3
get it
days.
done with, and, you know, if they need something to move on and it's getting closer to holidays and it's gonna get,
Well, that's the Thanksgiving week. I don't know if everybody's going to be around.
It's also, I think that's a good idea, Councilman Beadle. One of the items on the December 6th, and I just want to draw council's attention to it, is under item B, upcoming meetings and agenda items, is item 1, the capital priorities list. I think it's that quarterly time is particularly important because it's right before the legislative session, and it's good for you to have that list of your priorities. And with Shepherd Point, you know, and various harbor upgrades and whatnot, I think it'd be good for council to go through that priorities list. And it'd be good to meet with MB before then, have a work session beforehand. Then you can kind of coordinate community priorities, so, okay.
So which one?
So 20.
MBE, is she still here, or?
So we could do it the week of the 4th to the 8th.
I know she has a meeting on the 20th in Anchorage next week with, yeah, well, actually Karen's gonna be at the providers conference all next week, but I think the meeting's with the council, right? Tribal council.
For me, I'm gonna be at Board of Fish on the 30th through the 5th, and then the Young Fisherman Summit in Anchorage is going on the 6th through the 8th. I'll be up there. I can call in to the meeting on the 6th, but.
How about, I think Councilman Beadle was suggesting next Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday.
Yeah, those all work.
Those all work. Any preferences, council, or?
Monday or Tuesday.
Monday or Tuesday?
Monday or Wednesday.
Monday or Wednesday, okay.
And you do not have your board meeting that day?
I don't
So
have.
Wednesday, the 22nd?
Wednesday, the 22nd work? Okay, that would give us a little more time.
What time were they recommending?
I didn't get that part. I was going to suggest 6 in here. Does that work?
Just so I know when to be there.
You get to actually pick the time. So.
I mean, that'd be fine if that's.
All right.
We don't know how to be here then.
Okay, 6 o'clock next Wednesday.
Okay.
All right, great.
Well, here in this,
That's what I'll suggest.
And then just for,
you'll let us know.
yeah. Good.
I guess I should know what this place is doing. Do you know? Next week?
Yeah, meeting on Monday, planning commission.
Monday.
So Wednesday works good.
But I don't know if there's any
Okay.
other stuff in.
Okay. They have a big enough meeting room over there too to accommodate if we need to.
And this
so.
will be for the capital priorities list.
Yeah. And then just to circle back for the pending agenda, it would be to have an agenda item for the council to vote to go out to bid on the investment management services.
The RFP for.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
is that what you want?
Yes.
Does that need to come for a vote? Or is this just giving them guidance?
I think it does. I mean, we're going to put an RFP out for our management of our financials.
We're gonna need an ordinance or something.
Well,
Ellen.
Well, I know that's Councilman Beadle's flavor. He's talked about that several times, but I think first thing you do is you'd have a discussion with your finance director before you gave that direction. I mean, we're toward the end of the year here. I don't know the parameters of their contract right off the top of my head. I don't know any of those things, and I think, you know, while I'm the city manager, I do budgets. I am not a tried and true investment guy, and I think John knows more about that. Has a longer history, and I think his you should listen to his counsel before you make that decision. I mean, a couple weeks isn't going to make a huge difference for us in all of this. Mm-hmm. And it would also give me time to, you know, that is one of the reasons I asked Mr. Beadle about his investment goal. I have to look at that and see what it is right now so that I can accurately portray that to you.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and we'll put it on the pending agenda as a, you know.
I think you'd have a discussion with your finance director.
Sure, okay, will that work?
you know, we can just keep stalling, it's gonna keep costing us, and we haven't looked at this for a long time. I think it's, poor fiduciary is,
Well, we can put, you can pick a date, we can pick a meeting date to have a discussion. You know,
I think it's sooner than later. I mean, the stock market's going up, and if we're missing the boat, we're talking about budget and building our permanent fund, and if we're missing the boat, it ain't gonna come back and get us.
so, trying to think of what our agendas look like for December. When do we adopt the budget?
Yeah, on the 6th.
On the
So
budget?
that's gonna be a public hearing,
Yeah,
and we'll do the budget and the fee schedule.
and the capital priorities is actually, that's a fairly long discussion. I mean, that's something usually council likes to deliberate on, so. 22nd.
What about the, let's see, where's December? What about on the 20th, on that work session? Did we discuss it then, or do we have something else planned? Of December, so it's after the budget, and then we can look at it.
I don't know if Alan was gonna be gone then. Were you gonna be gone yet? Maybe.
I will adjust according to what you guys want to do.
Or, I mean, anytime, really.
Yeah, well, let's put it on the pending agenda. I think the 6th is pretty stacked, but maybe we could look at a date at that time.
Yeah, I know, me personally, I'd like to see like a presentation about what the fees have been, what, you know, what they've made us. And, you know, have all the information before we make a decision to vacate them.
Well, I think a conversation between John and perhaps have UBS come here and talk to you personally. You can ask him any question you want.
When do they generally give us their
Quarterly.
Quarterly.
They give quarterly reports.
Yeah. So,
The next one would be the 17th of January.
but they generally come once a year in person.
Well, there's something that they're supposed to do annually,
Yeah.
investment policy,
I thought they-
resolution.
Yeah, I thought they came once a year, and it's.
I can get a current report for you tomorrow if you want one.
Okay.
All you've got to do is ask, you know, I can ask them anytime and they can give me year to date.
I was just kind of jumping ahead because if they're coming in January, it seemed to me like it was not too long after the first year if they're coming in January or something.
I'll ask them and clarify that tomorrow and send you an email.
Okay, thank you. Other items for pending agenda?
When were we putting this on the calendar then?
I just gonna put it on the pending agenda up here, future agenda items, under item A. But it sounds like you'll get some information in the meantime, so. Any other items for the pending agenda? Okay, hearing none, audience participation. Can you state your name and residence for the record, please? Thank you.
Yeah, Tom Baylor, 304 Oak Inlet Drive. The newspaper and advertising. So we have a need for information, which I agree with. We have a need for support in the newspaper, which I agree with. And we have a need to save money, which I agree with. So sitting back there, my thought process is what would be historically spent with the newspaper? If it's 20,000 or whatever a year. Pick a number, come to a consensus. Let's say you're gonna spend $15,000 a year on newspaper. Pass the ordinance as written, give direction to the manager, put a cap on it. Say once the 15,000 is gone, we're not advertising there anymore. That gives him the flexibility of, like the impound things, maybe he won't put that in paper, but he'll put the bigger things. It also helps continue to support the local newspaper, which I totally agree with. And it kind of gives them in their budgeting process to know that, well, maybe they'll get 10 or 15,000 out of the city. So, and then the next council, you know, if they don't want to put it in their budget next year or something happens, you don't have to. And then, but I think it gives everybody the flexibility, and I think it does what you want it to do, is help support that local paper. So that'd be my suggestion. on the harbor building, you know, there's a lot of ways to save money, and one of those you could look at is possibly is even the, I don't know if it's the city or the harbor or whoever's gonna handle it, is actually purchasing the building. That would save you 20% on materials right there. So there's ways to do that to keep that $200,000 and make it go a long ways. And I want to thank Robert for, again, I think it was brought up today by Mr. Jones. It wasn't that long ago that there was talk of disbanding the Harbor Commission. So Robert's done a good job, and now it's time to let somebody else take over, I guess. And thanks all for your time, and that's all I got.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ann Schaefer. I live at 603 Cedar. And first of all, thank you. I'm really excited to serve on the Parks and Recreation Commission. And then the second thing that I wanted to say was when you're looking at your nominations to fill the vacancy of Council Seat E, I would really appreciate it if you would consider the current demographic makeup of the City Council. Cordova is a diverse city, and it would be nice to see some of that diversity reflected in the council. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Would that be a native preference, or?
Race, gender. I see a lot of white male, which is fine. But I mean, if you get, I would just be nice to see other experiences, voices, perspectives represented in the council.
You know, that's a good point. And every March there's elections, and and everybody's welcome to. I mean, there's call it age and residency. Throw your name in.
Yeah, I mean, I will. I'm not trying to like. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I'm just saying.
No, I'm just trying to
consider it.
I'm just trying to say it's not us up. You know, are we?
It is on the appointment, though. She's suggesting.
I'm saying for this appointment, if you have, I don't know, not to give preference to someone who's female or who has a native descent, but just consider that as all of the other things you consider. Thank you.
Careful what you ask for. Okay, thank you very much. Any other audience comments, participation? Okay. Council comments. I'll move this way. Councilman Jones.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank all the people who put letters of interest in. Thank my fellow council members for taking the time to come out tonight, and staff for bringing us resolutions and ordinances every meeting. And yeah, with that, I'll my time.
Councilman Weiss?
Yes, I would echo Kenny's comments, thanking everybody for staying interested and volunteering for these commissions. Tom, thank you for coming in and just shedding light on new things, new ways we can spend money that we don't do. I'm glad you're coming in and pointing it out as a concern that I can take into consideration later, because I don't think about that. No, yeah. Anyway, and congratulations to our refuse department on a 94 of 97.5 points for their for our dump out the road. That's awesome.
Councilman Gard?
I'd like to echo everything that was said for the two council members before me. I would also like to thank Robert for all his time he's put in at the Harbor Commission and making sure that's gotten up and going, and none of the stuff that went on tonight was anything against you. We're happy to have you on there taking good care of us all the time work. And again, thanks everybody for showing up.
Councilman Beal?
This last weekend, sobriety, some great speakers. A good friend of mine spoke, Bob Bernard. I went to listen to him. I don't know if I'll see him come summer. I don't know if he'll last that long. Anyway, the sobriety, the dancers, it was very good. Good food. If you missed it, next year. The pharmacy, man, I'm hoping you guys do good in that number in the budget. can be put elsewhere. But the pharmacy, if you guys haven't, go look at it, it's looking good. And the Southeast Conference, I wrote that on there. I think anything we can say you're doing there to promote the ferry for here, that's a huge economic engine for us. So I think that we should be connected there somehow to have input or a name to a face there that we're not, they know we're worried about it, we care. And no offense, I'm sorry. I was just being rude, sorry. Thank you all.
Hey, next item is executive session. So entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Do we have time in the regular meeting?
No.
I make a motion, we adjourn, or we move to executive session.
Second.